Verses 13 to 18. This appearance of Christ to the two disciples going to Emmaus was mentioned, and but just mentioned, before, Mk 16:12, here it is largely related. It happened the same day that Christ rose, the first day of the new world that rose with him. One of these two disciples was Cleopas or Alphaeus, said by the ancients to be the brother of Joseph, Christ's supposed father, who the other was is not certain. Some think it was Peter. It should seem indeed that Christ did appear particularly to Peter that day, which the 11 spoke of among themselves, v. 34, and Paul mentions, 1 Co 15:5. But it could not be Peter that was one of the two, for he was one of the 11 to whom the two returned, and, besides, we know Peter so well as to think that if he had been one of the two he would have been the chief speaker, and not Cleopas. It was one of those that were associated with the 11, mentioned v. 9. Now in this passage of story we may observe the walk and talk of these two disciples. They went to a village called Emmaus, which is reckoned to be about 2 hours' walk from Jerusalem. It is here said to be about 60 furlongs, 7 measured miles, v. 13. Whether they went thither upon business, or to see some friend, does not appear. I suspect that they were going homewards to Galilee, with an intention not to inquire more after this Jesus, that they were meditating a retreat, and stole away from their company without asking leave or taking leave, for the accounts brought them that morning of their Master's resurrection seemed to them as idle tales, and, if so, no wonder that they began to think of making the best of their way home. But as they traveled they talked together of all those things which had happened, v. 14. They had not courage to confer of these things, and consult what was to be done in the present juncture at Jerusalem, for fear of the Jews, but, when they were got out of the hearing of the Jews, they could talk it over with more freedom. They talked over these things, reasoning with themselves concerning the probabilities of Christ's resurrection, for, according as these appeared, they would either go forward or return back to Jerusalem. Note, it well becomes the disciples of Christ, when they are together, to talk of his death and resurrection, thus they may improve one another's knowledge, refresh one another's memory, and stir up one another's devout affections. The good company they met with upon the road, when Jesus himself came, and joined himself to them, v. 15. They communed together, and reasoned, and perhaps were warm at the argument, one hoping that their Master was risen, and would set up his kingdom, the other despairing. Jesus himself drew near, as a stranger who, seeing them travel the same way that he went, told them that he should be glad of their company. We may observe it, for our encouragement to keep up Christian conference and edifying discourse among us, that where but two together are well employed in work of that kind Christ will come to them, and make a third. When they that fear the Lord speak one to another the Lord hearkens and hears, and is with them of a truth, so that two thus twisted in faith and love become a threefold cord, not easily broken. Eccle 4:12. They in their communings and reasonings together were searching for Christ, comparing notes concerning him, that they might come to more knowledge of him, and now Christ comes to them. Note, they who seek Christ shall find him, he will manifest himself to those that inquire after him, and give knowledge to those who use the helps for knowledge which they have. When the spouse inquired of the watchman concerning her beloved, it was but a little that she passed from them, but she found him. Cant 3:4. But, though they had Christ with them, they were not at first aware of it, v. 16. Their eyes were held, that they should not know him. It should seem, there were both an alteration of the object, for it is said in Mark that now he appeared in another form, and a restraint upon the organ, for here it is said that their eyes were held by a divine power, or, as some think, there was a confusion in the medium, the air was so disposed that they could not discern who it was. No matter how it was, but so it was they did not know him, Christ so ordering it that they might the more freely discourse with him and he with them, and that it might appear that his word, and the influence of it, did not depend upon his bodily presence, which the disciples had too much doted upon, and must be weaned from, but he could teach them, and warm their hearts, by others, who should have his spiritual presence with them, and should have his grace going along with them unseen. The conference that was between Christ and them, when he knew them, and they knew not him. Now Christ and his disciples, as is usual when friends meet incognito, or in a disguise, are here crossing questions. Christ's first question to them is concerning their present sadness, which plainly appeared in their countenances. What manner of communications are those that you have one with another as you walk, and are sad? v. 17. It is a very kind and friendly inquiry. Observe. They were sad. It appeared to a stranger that they were so. They had lost their dear master, and were, in their own apprehensions, quite disappointed in their expectations from him. They had given up the cause, and knew not what course to take to retrieve it. Note, Christ's disciples have reason to be sad when he withdraws from them, to fast when the bridegroom is taken from them. Though he was risen from the dead, yet either they did not know it or did not believe it, and so they were still in sorrow. Note, Christ's disciples are often sad and sorrowful even when they have reason to rejoice, but through the weakness of their faith they cannot take the comfort that is offered to them. Being sad, they had communications one with another concerning Christ. Note, first, it becomes Christians to talk of Christ. Were our hearts as full of him, and of what he has done and suffered for us, as they should be, out of the abundance of the heart the mouth would speak, not only of God and his providence, but of Christ and his grace and love. Secondly, good company and good converse are an excellent antidote against prevailing melancholy. When Christ's disciples were sad they did not each one get by himself, but continued as he sent them out, 2 and 2, for 2 are better than 1, especially in times of sorrow. Giving vent to the grief may perhaps give ease to the grieved, and by talking it over we may talk ourselves or our friends may talk us into a better frame. Joint mourners should be mutual comforters. Comforts sometimes come best from such. Christ came up to them, and inquired into the matter of their talk, and the cause of their grief. What manner of communications are these? Though Christ had now entered into his state of exaltation, yet he continued tender of his disciples, and concerned for their comfort. He speaks as one troubled to see their melancholy, wherefore look ye so sadly today. General 40:7. Our Lord Jesus takes notice of the sorrow and sadness of his disciples, and is afflicted in their afflictions. Christ has hereby taught us to be conversable. Christ here fell into discourse with 2 grave serious persons, though he was a stranger to them and they knew him not, and they readily embraced him. It does not become Christians to be morose and shy, but to take pleasure in good society. We are hereby taught to be compassionate. When we see our friends in sorrow and sadness, we should, like Christ here, take cognizance of their grief, and give them the best counsel and comfort we can, weep with them that weep. In answer to this, they put a question to him concerning his strangeness. Art thou only a stranger in Jerusalem, and hast not known the things that are come to pass there in these days? Cleopas gave him a civil answer. He does not rudely ask him, as for what we are talking of, what is that to you? And bid him go about his business. Note, we ought to be civil to those who are civil to us, and to conduct ourselves obligingly to all, both in word and deed. It was a dangerous time now with Christ's disciples, yet he was not jealous of this stranger, that he had any design upon them, to inform against them, or bring them into trouble. Charity is not forward to think evil, no, not of strangers. He is full of Christ himself and of his death and sufferings, and wonders that everybody else is not so too. What? Art thou such a stranger in Jerusalem as not to know what has been done to our Master there? Note, those are strangers indeed in Jerusalem that know not of the death and sufferings of Christ. What? Are they daughters of Jerusalem, and yet so little acquainted with Christ as to ask, what is thy beloved more than another beloved? He is very willing to inform this stranger concerning Christ, and to draw on further discourse with him upon this subject. He would not have anyone that had the face of a man to be ignorant of Christ. Note, those who have themselves the knowledge of Christ crucified should do what they can to spread that knowledge, and lead others into an acquaintance with him. And it is observable that these disciples, who were so forward to instruct the stranger, were instructed by him, for to him that has, and uses what he has, shall be given. It appears, by what Cleopas says, that the death of Christ made a great noise in Jerusalem, so that it could not be imagined that any man should be such a stranger in the city as not to know of it. It was all the talk of the town, and discoursed of in all companies. Thus the matter of fact came to be universally known, which, after the pouring out of the Spirit, was to be explained.